Good morning, Rabbi.
Good
Good
morning,
morning, everyone.
everybody.
Oh,
How's everybody doing? Okay.
yeah.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right. Welcome and glad you joined us. The last Judaism 101 class of 5785. Obviously, at the end of this, I'll say see you next year, which is, of course, when I say that, of course, I mean the next Jewish New Year, which begins tomorrow night, if you can believe that. Just going to turn up my volume here. Um, we are going to be talking today about the fall holidays that are not necessarily considered high holidays, even though they are um, very much related and attached to the other major holidays. We have talked about Rosh Hashanah, we have talked about Yom Kippur, and only a few days after Yom Kippur, only 5 days after Yom Kippur, we have the start of a week-long holiday known as Sukkot. And then from Sukkot, we go into Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. There's a lot to unpack there. And so I will get into that. Anybody have any questions from things that we've talked about previously in recent sessions? As you know, all of our sessions are online. I think people want to jump in and ask. Okay, so all good. And now I may have talked about this part before, but if you look in the Torah and if you look at the description of a holiday that starts in the middle of the month of Tishrei, you get to a holiday that is known as Hechag, meaning the holiday. In other words, this holiday that we now know as Sukkot was really, at least initially, known as the holiday, the ultimate holiday. What made it the ultimate? Well, there's a couple of different things. First of all, it is a holiday that lasts 7 days. So Rosh Hashanah, only one day, at least initially in the Bible. Now we do 2 days. Yom Kippur, only one day. Sukkot is a full week-long festival. Um, and
Wait, except we've made it into an 8-day holiday.
we made it into a 9 day holiday, actually, if you
9-day
count
holiday.
Sukkot,
All
right?
right.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
mean
So,
it's
so,
okay. Oh, that's
so
right. We've made it into a 9-day holiday. Yeah, you're right.
right, exactly. So, like, so what? So, all right. So, what in the world have we done with this thing, right?
Well, the same thing we did with everything else. We added an extra day.
We add an extra day. So, which I think we talked about in a previous session, the idea that outside of the land of Israel, we add an extra day of Yom Tov, an extra day of major holiday to every Yom Tov. The only exception we make is to Yom Kippur because we're not going to make people fast 2 days, for 2 consecutive days.
Right. Shemini Atzeret is Simchat Torah in Israel, and that's
Right.
right. Okay, it's 9 days. Okay, I got it. Thank you. I've
Right.
always been confused about that.
It's okay. It's okay. And by the way, this is one of the, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the um, challenges of observing the anniversary of the October 7th attacks is the fact that the October 7th attacks 2 years ago took place on the day in Israel that is a combination of Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. So people associate that massacre with Shmini Atzeret. They also associated with Simchat Torah. So in America or outside of Israel, what day do you actually commemorate it?
Well, I think they also commemorated on October 7th.
Right. And then, yeah, then
So it's
exactly. Then,
tricky.
then there's the secular
October
day.
7th is October 7th, you know?
Right. Right. So it becomes a complicated thing, which now granted,
And they aren't really commemorating it. They're still living it. So
no question.
it's, you know, it's like an everyday thing. So
No, it's true. It's true. And so, like many other things in history, it takes us a while to sort through how we remember, commemorate, observe. It takes a while to really understand that. I feel like, we're um, 24 years past 9/11, and we're still kind of trying to figure that out. How do we best remember that? So if we're having trouble with something 24 years before, something only 2 years before, it's going to still be a challenge. Um, so so the scope of the holiday of Sukkot being 7 days. Now, the way we observe it outside of Israel is that the first 2 days of Sukkot are considered major holidays. So this this year, that's going to start on Monday night, October 6th, and will extend through the afternoon of October 8th. But there's still more days of the holiday. And this is where we get a concept known as Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed refers to the intermediate days of the holiday of Sukkot, also of the holiday of Passover, which we will get to, at a little later time. What is Chol HaMoed? It is time in which we are still observing many aspects of the holiday. However, we are still doing work that we have to do, meaning to expect everyone to observe a major holiday for 7 days straight without working would be considered too burdensome. So there's a recognition that, you have to work at some point. So during Chol HaMoed, you do work, but you still observe some aspects of the holiday, which we will talk about what those are in a moment. But you only do the work that you absolutely have to do.
Okay.
You only do work that is absolutely necessary. So there are plenty of discussions in Jewish law that talk about, okay, let's say you have to water your field. Okay, make sure you're watering your field, but don't do more than you have to. Don't pick more food, let's say, than you absolutely need. It's that sort of thing. Work if you must, work if you do, but you don't have to overdo it. Now, what are these aspects of the holiday that we're still observing? Well, with Sukkot, here is one major way that we do it. Sukkot is basically the plural of a word that is sukkah. Sukkah means essentially an impermanent living structure. The idea is that everyone, if they have it in their power, needs to dwell in an impermanent structure known as a sukkah for 7 days. So what does that mean? Does that mean a tent? Kinda, not necessarily. The idea is that you are supposed to build a structure that is not meant to stand for the rest of the year. It should be relatively basic. It should have at least 3 walls. It should have a roof, but the roof should be at minimum see-through and really not completed. People sometimes do this by just taking just a bit of lumber. They take some canvas to make into the walls, and then they might put some strip of bamboo on top. They sometimes will put planks of wood diagonally across it, and then you're supposed to put greenery on the roof itself. That greenery has one of the most difficult to pronounce names that you can imagine. We call it schach. I'm not kidding. You actually say schach, and you try not to spit everything that's in your throat by saying it. So it is, like I said, at least 3 walls, and it's meant to be something that is reasonably easy to construct and reasonably easy to take down. Now at Hezkamuna, we have a little courtyard, and in that courtyard there is essentially what is kind of like a frame for a sukkah that we actually have in that courtyard. And the idea is that when we get close to the holiday of Sukkot, we put impermanent walls around the poles of that thing, and then we put greenery on top, and then we have a sukkah. Everyone, if they have it in their power and their means, ideally should construct their own sukkah. But what if you don't have the space and you don't have the means and the ability? Okay, it's fine. The idea is, whenever possible, to be in a sukkah, to eat in a sukkah, somebody else's, or one at the synagogue. We actually, so for instance, during Sukkot, the first couple of days, which are major holidays and our office is closed, we have services, and then we have our kiddush, we have our food afterward. We eat it ideally in the sukkah. During Chol HaMoed, during those intermediate days where you're allowed to do work, the office anticipates the possibility that some people might want to come by and bring their lunch and eat it in our sukkah, and that's okay. There are even people who sleep in their sukkah. I'm not saying you have to. I actually, every year growing up in Denver, I actually, for a few years, my family had a sukkah, and I would sleep in it. At least like a couple times during the holiday. One time I slept in it, and this being Colorado, it snowed. That was fun. Um, Here's the thing, though.
Did you go inside when it snowed?
I don't think I was under like this really warm sleeping bag. I didn't notice until the morning.
Okay.
It was a really good sleeping bag, I guess. Um, uh, Here's the thing, though. Uh, if you say, gosh, that's really uncomfortable. Gosh, I don't think I could do that. It's not the end of the world if you can't. In fact, a question that is understandably asked is, what if it rains? Do I have to eat in the sukkah if it rains? The answer is no, you don't. The holiday of Sukkot is supposed to be a holiday of great joy. And the rabbis comment that if something like the weather is preventing you from experiencing great joy, then go inside. It's okay. So it is weather dependent what we do in the sukkah. There was actually one year in Charleston where our synagogue set up our sukkah, and I think we may have sat in the first couple of days, and the rest of the week it was pouring rain. We just never dealt with it. Um, it happens. It can happen. But if the weather is nice, it's really nice to be there. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we going through all this? Well, it commemorates a couple different things. It commemorates the times, the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness between being liberated from slavery in Egypt until entering the promised land. And during that time, the people of Israel were wanderers. And they lived in tents. Well, I mean, a lot of people lived in tents in general, but they lived in tents not meant to be stayed in for years and years at a time. They lived in impermanent structures. And according to the Talmud, the sukkah is like the Ananei HaKavod, the cloud of protection that God provided over the Israelite people during that time in the wilderness. The idea is that the Israelites were wandering and therefore vulnerable to attacks, vulnerable to the elements. And the fact that God protects the Israelites over the course of the 40 years, according to the Torah, is a testament to the wonderful faith that the Israelites had, and the faith that God returns in kind. So when we build a sukkah today, we are making ourselves purposefully vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, we say that we are giving our trust in God. Now, another reason why is that it is the fall harvest. Sukkot, in a sense, is kind of like the Jewish Thanksgiving, in a way. I'm not saying you have to have turkey or stuffing. I mean, that's up to you. But essentially, we are thankful for our, the produce of the land. It is tied into the agricultural cycle. And there is evidence to suggest that in ancient Near Eastern cultures, there were plenty of different peoples doing something like Sukkot. We just attached religious meaning to our festival. So, like I said, there will be a sukkah at Heska Amuna. And and if you wonder, oh gosh, what if I want to build a sukkah? What do I need to do? It can be as complex or as simple as you want to make it. There are plenty of companies. You can go to, I think it's sukkah.com or 1-800-sukkah. I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, it's not hard to find. You can order your own sukkah. Sometimes it's basically, metal poles and canvas, and, you use some bungee cords and you got it made. It does cost a few $100s, I will say, to get one of those sort of prefabricated ones. Some people who are more handy Might go to Home Depot and just get some lumber and some canvas and, probably do it much less expensively. But given that I have the handiness of the Venus de Milo, meaning I'm not handy at all, um, uh, I'm it's kind of tough for me to do. Um,
They even sell them on Amazon.
oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, you can.
Just saying. I just looked at.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, I mean, there are plenty of different and they come in different sizes too. Um, so that's one aspect of the holiday, dwelling in a sukkah. And so whether it's the first couple of days of the holiday, which are Yom Tov, which are major holidays in which you're not supposed to do work, or whether it's Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days where you are allowed to do work, the idea is whenever possible, whenever you're able, to sit in the sukkah, to eat in the sukkah if you can. Some people are able to work in the sukkah. Um, Depends on how close you are to Wi-Fi, I guess, but I guess there are different ways to do that. Um, it's actually very common for there to be social activities. And yes, many of them are called pizza in the hut, where people get pizza and they put it, and you eat it in the sukkah. Um, so, so in that sense, it can be a lot of fun. I'm going to share my screen now because I want to talk about another aspect of the holiday, which is that we are also commanded in the Torah to take in our hands periodically several species of vegetation. And these are known more commonly as lulav and etrog. So I want to show you, let me just load up some pictures here. So here, hopefully, see if I can, yeah, here we go. This is a drawing of a lulav and etrog. Now, let's start with the lulav. You see that there is basically sort of like a bouquet, if you will, of green plants. And there are really three different green plants that are bound together. The one in the middle, the one that has a little white stripe in the middle of it, is known as a lulav. The lulav means palm. So this is a palm branch. Then you also have one of the other greeneries is known as hadassim, which means willow. And then the other one is aravot, hadassim, which means myrtle, and aravot, which means willow. I get them mixed up sometimes, I admit. And the idea is that you are supposed to take that into your hand, and I'll tell you when we do this. And then you see this yellow oval thing that you'd probably say that kind of looks like a lemon. And it is kind of like a lemon. It's called an etrog. An etrog is a yellowish citrus fruit that is, by the way, way more sour than a lemon. Just so you know. I would be very cautious before biting into one. But you don't bite into it, certainly during the holiday. Over the course of the holiday, it's considered a mitzvah, it's considered a commandment to, at some point during the day, at least, each day, to take the lulav and etrog into your hands to take the, well, and by the way, when I say lulav, I mentioned that it's lulav, hadassim, and aravot. You have the palm, you have the myrtle, and then you have the willow. Many times we refer to that set of green plants, we oftentimes refer that as simply as the lulav. I know it's a little bit of a misnomer, but the idea is to take a lulav into our hands and take the etrog into our hands. And then what do we do with it? Well, we're supposed to wave it. Now, what in the world is going on here? This is a photograph of a man who has taken the four species, the lulav, hadassim, aravot, and the etrog, and he is now waving it in 6 directions: to the right, behind him, to the left, above him, forward, up and down. It is, and when does this happen? Well, you can do this any day during Sukkot other than Shabbat. So it's really 6 different days that you wave the lulav and etrog. When does it typically happen? Well, it typically happens at morning services. However, if you're not able to get to morning services, you can wave lulav and etrog anytime during the day of the days of the holidays. The only day, like I said, you don't do is Shabbat. Now, again, how do we do this? Okay, this might come out a little blurry here on your screen. Now, by the way, it says here how to shake the lulav and etrog. You're not really supposed to shake it. Inevitably, if you're waving these around, inevitably some of the leaves are going to shake away, shake from that and fall to the ground. That is sort of an inevitability. But you're not supposed to aggressively shake them. So what do? You hold the bundle in your hands. You have your lulav in your right hand and the etrog in your left hand with the pitom. The pitom means essentially the stem pointing downward. Then you say a blessing. Then you turn the etrog up 180 degrees. Basically take the stem and point it upward now. And then you wave the bundle forward, right, backward, left, up, and down. And the question, of course, is why? Why are we doing this? I have to admit that watching a group of people doing this on Sukkot is a very strange sight, especially if you're not used to this. It is, there are times where even years, even years into my rabbinate, years into being a rabbi, that I still look at a room of people doing this and say, what are we doing exactly? Why, huh? It really does feel like one of the uh, least logical things that we do. But there is actually a logic behind it, or at least there is a reason given for doing so. As I hope I mentioned, the Torah commands us to take these species, right? To take them in our hands as a way of expressing our gratitude, our thanks for the fall harvest. But then why do we wave them? We wave them around because we are recognizing the presence of God. and the idea that God is all over the place, that God is omnipresent in all different directions. That's the religious meaning behind it. Now, do we have any questions about this?
I have a question.
Please.
So if we don't have specifically the etrog, are you allowed to make one? As I don't want to be disrespectful, but can you use a lemon and find some other plants or something like that? Or what do you think about that?
Um, do you, you're really not supposed to, because it really has to be like a sort of specific kind of perfectly reasonable question, by the way. But um, you're really not supposed to. I apologize for the noise. As you may note, I'm in a car with the windows up, so I need to start the engine to get the air conditioning going. So
Question, Rabbi.
please,
Okay. I've got this book. It's backwards, but it's called Living Judaism. And
yeah.
it used to be on Heska Muna's recommended reading list. I haven't looked at that for years. But anyway, it says in here in a paragraph about Sukkot, and about the etrog and the lulav, that traditionally the explanation is that the lulav represents the strong backbone and the etrog represents the warm heart of the Jewish people. So I find that very interesting that a fruit that's very sour is supposed to represent the warm heart of the Jewish people, according to this.
Yeah. Uh, you know, a lot of people have looked for alternate meanings behind lulav and etrog. So indeed, there are plenty of other explanations. There's this idea that it's I've heard like it's the eyes and the ears, and I mean, like, people have tried to make a lot of different metaphors to try to explain it. It's uh, and I think it's understandable that people are trying to grasp for meaning behind it, because again, if you look at people doing it, it just looks unusual, right? It's not wrong, it's not bad. It just sort of seems a little like, what are we doing exactly? Um, and so people have grasped for meaning from this ritual for a long time. And again, it makes sense they would do so. So that is one suggestion. There is another suggestion, by the way, and this is probably due to a certain to a more superstitious following. And by the way, I mean, Judaism is not immune from superstitious theories. Um, there is one rabbinic idea that states that why are we waving the lulav and etrog in all directions? It is to ward off the adversary. Who is the adversary? Hasatan, otherwise known as Satan.
The inference to the lemon, to it being sour.
Mhm.
You think about the lemon is sour, but what do we use it for? We make lemonade, which is comforting, use a lot of lemon in cooking. So though it's a sour fruit, it's immensely popular and used to do a lot of things. So
Right.
Probably and a much more kind of common sense explanation to me is it was probably easily available back in biblical times, when maybe.
No, I think that's part of it, but yeah, I mean, and it is so in the Torah, it doesn't say the word etrog isn't in it. However, it does say pre-Eitz Hadar, which means a um a a fruit of a tree that is hadar, that is beautiful.
Mm.
So the idea is to to do that. So in other words, I mean, regarding Mark's point, I would say when life gives you etrogs, make etrogade, right? In a sense, right? But no, but it's actually no, but it's true. And by the way, um, there are people that I know that after the holiday is done, they take their etrog, or they sometimes collect etrogene from other people who aren't gonna, who were just gonna kind of, throw theirs away. And they make etrog jam. I've actually tasted etrog jam once before. You got to put a lot of sugar to make it palatable. But the one I tried, well, it was pretty good. So you can do it. It's really really sour on its own. Um, so but the idea is to celebrate the fall harvest. And I gotta say, there are many Jews for whom Sukkot, being in the sukkah, waving lulav and etrog, it's their favorite holiday. They really enjoy it. They love being outdoors. They love connecting with nature. And I forgot to mention this regarding the sukkah. It is considered praiseworthy to invite people into your sukkah whenever possible. Um, it's and in fact, there is a custom that every day of Sukkot that we symbolically invite um, our our great biblical heroes and heroines. That there's a custom, this is known as Ushpizin, where we invite the first night we invite Abraham and Sarah into our sukkah. The next day we invite Isaac and Rebecca into our sukkah. Um, they don't even have to RSVP. We just invite them in. But the idea is, whenever possible, to invite people into a sukkah. And that means, by the way, that if you say to yourself, I can't build a sukkah, it's too much for me, or what have you. Try to go into a sukkah, whether at Heskamuna or whether or if you're invited to one. Um, it's I mean, I would venture to guess that in October, um, it is many places it's really uh, it's a really nice place to be. Um, let me I just okay, so
Oh,
Mark Siegel, thank you for
yeah,
sending this.
yeah.
Let me see if I can share this. This is in the Heska Muna Sukkah, and let's see. The question is, should I don't know if I'm able to get the video of this. That may be a little hard for me on this device, but at the very least, these are people in our sukkah um, waving lulav and etrog. The one you see on the right is actually one of the people in our class right now, in without his makeup on. No. Uh,
Moses.
no, no. Mark Foreman likes to sometimes he's got a Moses outfit. So it's and so we were doing this, I imagine, for an educational program. Um, so very fun.
It's
Um,
it's not
so indeed,
actually a video, it is a live thing that if you touch it, it'll move for a couple of seconds, but I apparently took no videos.
okay, it's all right. By the way, plenty of I'm sure plenty. Especially if you're watching this on YouTube, there are plenty of places you can see people waving lulav and etrog. Plenty of videos to be found there. So so Sukkot lasts for 7 days, and then you have an extra day, and outside of Israel, it's an extra 2 days. And they really are two different ideas. The first one is known as Shmini Atzeret. Shmini, Atzeret spelled Atzeret. Shmini Atzeret essentially means the 8th day of assembly. It tells us in the Torah that we have an extra day after Sukkot in which we are not to do work, which we have an extra holiday. It doesn't really say much about what we do on that holiday besides not work and to offer, at least in the times of the Bible, sacrifice. Certainly in our time we do prayer. What's the meaning behind Shmini Atzeret? Well, the most popular explanation is that Shmini Atzeret is a way of God telling the people of Israel, I have enjoyed your company so much during this past week. Please stay another day. That's the explanation that seems to hold sway, and I think it's a lovely idea. We do a couple of rituals to make Shmini Atzeret, to bring some, I guess, to bring people in to Shmini Atzeret. One thing we do is we do the Yizkor service. I think I talked about this last week, where we talked about Yom Kippur. Yizkor is the service of remembrance, and we recite Yizkor at the end of the 3 pilgrimage festivals being Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. And then we do it also on Yom Kippur. So the idea is that if you are memorializing someone, if you're remembering someone who has passed, coming to Yizkor services, definitely helpful. Definitely a meaningful way to do that. The other thing we do is, remember, these holidays are, especially Sukkot, is definitely tied to the agricultural cycle. And in Israel, we are getting closer to the rainy season. And even in America, fall, sometimes, we have showers during the fall. Now, if we were to pray for rain before Sukkot, that would seem pretty counterintuitive, right? Because the idea is that we kind of want the rain to hold off during Sukkot, because we want to be outside. We want to be in the sukkah. But once Sukkot is done, then we can pray for rain. So Shmini Atzeret, the day after, the technical end of Sukkot, we pray for rain. And there's a prayer that we say during the services for Shmini Atzeret. So then, as Shmini Atzeret ends, we have this one last holiday known as Simchat Torah, which literally means joy of the Torah. The idea is as follows. Over the course of the year, we study the Torah from beginning to end, Genesis through Deuteronomy. Now, depending on the congregation, we might not actually chant every word of the Torah every year. We may do like what our congregation does, and a lot of conservative synagogues do, is they do 1/3 of every portion every year, because of concerns of, wanting to make sure that we have people who can read it appropriately. And also the length of services can be an issue sometimes if you read the entire Torah portion every week. But at the very least, we study every portion of the Torah each week in order. When you get to Simchat Torah, we have one portion left. That portion is it consists of the last 2 chapters of the book of Deuteronomy. It is a final poem that notes blessings and ideas about the tribes of Israel, and then describes in the final chapter the death of Moses. Now, studying Torah is considered to be a lifelong endeavor. And so we've created this ritual in which we read the end of the Torah, and a minute later, we start reading the beginning of the Torah. We basically, there's a portion that we read that's the conclusion of the Torah, the end of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 34. And then a minute later, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, off we go again. And the idea is that the Torah we should never stop learning Torah. And when it ends, we begin again. This is a cause for celebration. Simchat Torah is, I would say, to borrow a term, one of the jolliest holidays we have. It is one in which the custom is both in the evening service that starts the holiday and in the morning service the following morning, it is customary to dance with Torah scrolls 7 times around the sanctuary where we're praying. I have a couple of photos depicting this sort of thing. Maybe not the clearest here, but the idea, I mean, this is actually taken from a picture in Jerusalem, but the idea is that we are, just as it looks, we are taking Torah scrolls and we are dancing and we're singing, and it's fun. It's fun. We dance around, we sing. There's one aspect of it that I will mention in a moment that is maybe a little more controversial, but there are also customs. I don't like doing this, honestly, but if you have a large congregation, sometimes people literally unfurl the entire Torah scroll from beginning to end. I don't like doing this because I get nervous that it's going to fall to the ground or something's going to rip. I really get nervous about this. But there are some people who like to do this, and where you can see the entire Torah, an entire Torah scroll from beginning to end. What is somewhat controversial about this is where did everybody go? Hold on. Okay. So what can be a little controversial about this is that there are some people in places where they use the holiday of Simchat Torah as an excuse to drink heavily. And now I will acknowledge I'm not a drinker. I barely touch alcohol, and if you are one who enjoys alcohol, it's okay. I mean, as long as you're doing it responsibly, of course. I I do not advocate excessive drinking. So is it typical to see people, enjoying, maybe a little shot of liquor, or, having what we sometimes refer to as a l'chaim, right? L'chaim, to life, right? They'll say, let's have a l'chaim, let's have a shot of something. Okay. That's, again, in moderation, it's fine. But I'm not here to endorse, and I don't think synagogues should be endorsing excessive drinking on Simchat Torah. But I would say that if it is one of 2 days where if you were to if you were to only find um, uh, like liquor at a synagogue, uh, Simchat Torah is one of those days. Um, but the idea is to be joyous, regardless of how you do it, right? The idea is to be joyous. There's a lot of singing. There's a lot of there's singing, there's dancing, and there's a bit of frivolity involved as well. Um, and one thing we do is we oftentimes honor individual congregants with a special aliyah to the Torah. An aliyah refers to um, somebody being called up. Aliyah means like it's, to go up. Um, they will have a special honor to go up to the Torah scroll and to say blessings over the Torah. And that honor is considered especially meaningful when you have the honor to for the final um, reading of the Torah, the last reading of Deuteronomy chapter 34, or if you have the honor of the very beginning of the Torah, to say blessings when we read the very beginning of the book of Genesis. And so it's a mechanism for people to honor those who are active in the congregation, who are giving to the congregation, however it is. So questions on Simchat Torah. I will say that Simchat Torah marks the conclusion of essentially of more than 3 weeks of continuous holidays, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. By the time I get to Simchat Torah, I can be a little punchy, I gotta say. That kind of adds to the frivolity. So nothing I do or say should be held against me on Simchat Torah. No, that's not true. But in all seriousness, it is. It is really the conclusion of the fall holiday cycle, and uh, for those who work in the Jewish world, for those who volunteer heavily in the Jewish world, Simchat Torah marks the conclusion of that, and it really, it is kind of a big sigh of relief to be done with it, as joyous and as lovely as these days can be. There is an expression that which is acharei hachagim, which means after the holidays, meaning, uh, sometimes somebody has a question for a rabbi, for somebody who works for a synagogue, a lay leader of a synagogue, and they have this question about something going on. They said, "Can we talk about this acharei hachagim? Can we talk about this after the holidays are done? Because right now we're a little busy." I refer to this time as tax season for Jewish professionals and active Jewish volunteers, and it really is. But it's a lot of work, but for a lot of reward as well, a lot of rewarding moments. And the idea is that hopefully we are on the right foot for the rest of the year. I'm going to mention one last thing, and I know I'm kind of circling back to Sukkot. But remember how Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are these days where we're supposed to consider how we've been, and to do acts of repentance, in order to dedicate ourselves to be better people. And I think I mentioned that on Yom Kippur, the idea is that the books are closed, right? The book of life is closed or sealed, meaning, Yom Kippur is sort of the last, kind of our last moment where we can really, say words of repentance. Yes and no. There are customs that say that there is still an avenue for redemption over the holiday of Sukkot. And so one of the customs is to march around the sanctuary with the lulav and etrog on Sukkot, and to do what's known as Hoshanot. Hoshana means save us now. So we say Hoshanot through the different days of Sukkot. And so really, this dedication to getting the year off to a good start extends throughout the holiday of Sukkot. And hopefully, once we are done with that, we have gone through a process in which we have connected with God, in which we have connected with people that we care about, and we've connected with people in our community, whether we know them well or not. And hopefully, throughout that process, that sends the rest of the year into a good place. Any last questions before we call it a day here today?
I've got the fall holidays in Judaism. Do you have the idea that they also point forward to like judgment, and then to the God being with men for like Sukkot pointing towards after judgment, God is with us? Or is that there? Is that in Judaism also? Or?
Yeah. I mean, that's oftentimes an interpretation that people use. In other words, that when we, the Psalm 27, which I may have mentioned last time, that the one thing that we are looking for, the one thing we ask, is to dwell in God's sanctuary. And the idea is that on Sukkot, having completed Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that we are now dwelling closely to God. We are now, especially if we're in the Sukkah, we are dwelling closely to God. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair interpretation. So in that sense, we have, a connection between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with Sukkot and the days that follow. So next Sunday, we will talk about, we're going to start talking about Shabbat. We're going to talk about that very important holiday. And that will certainly take place over multiple sessions, because there's a lot to say, there's a lot to go through. But hopefully, hopefully we'll be able to, work through it pretty thoroughly. In the meantime, as I mentioned, Rosh Hashanah begins tomorrow evening. For those that I will see at services at Heska Amuna, I look forward to seeing you in person. For those who may be observing Rosh Hashanah in a different way or in a different place, regardless, I wish all of you a Shana Tova Umetuka, a good and sweet beginning of the new year. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
You, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, we'll see you
You're
next year. We'll see you next year.
See you next year.